What's going on YouTube? Super Insane 18 here, and today we are going to talk about hand traps. Now, what is a hand trap? A hand trap is an unofficial term used to describe monster effects that are activated from the hand in response to an opponent's actions. They are not actual trap cards in any way, but function similarly as a previously unseen card effect used to surprise or disrupt the opponent. Now, this means that cards such as Infinite Impermanence aren't actually considered hand traps, despite the fact that it is a trap that you would use from your hand. So let's go ahead and just talk about some of the best hand traps that are seeing play in the current July 2021 format. So let's go ahead and throw them all up on the screen now. As you can see, there is a pretty wide variety of hand traps, and we are just going to discuss them one at a time. This is a video that I am making just because I've had a lot of people ask me recently what hand traps they should be playing, either in their side or their main deck, and what they're good and not good against. So let's go ahead and jump on in. Starting things off, we have Ally of Justice Cycle Reader. Now, this is a somewhat stronger, albeit a little bit limited version of DD Crow. Right now, there is Drytron in the format, so this is pretty decent. You are able to banish 2 instead of 1, but it very much so is format dependent because you do have to have a light deck that revolves around Graveyard. So, I would not main this, but I definitely would side it for this current format. Next, we have Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring, which is arguably the most generic hand trap. Chances are, if you are playing any sort of deck ever, you will have an effect that will be able to be Ash Blossomed, so this is usually one of the go-to first hand traps that you do put in your main deck. Some people side it, but this is a card that I think if you are going to play it at all, it has to be in your main deck, but it isn't really the best for the format right now. It is definitely a generic, very good card, but I do think some of the hand traps on this list are just better. Artifact Lancia is another format-dependent card, however it is not as situational as something like Ally of Justice Cycle Reader. Pretty much any format that has a deck that is going to be a banish-based strategy, Artifact Lancia is a go-to card. However, I do think it is more so of a side deck rather than a main deck choice. DD Crow is a weaker but less situational version of the Ally of Justice Cycle Reader, and it actually is pretty good right now. The fact that it is a wing beast makes it a very strong main deck candidate for decks like Tri-Brigade, and the fact that it isn't limited to just light monsters and you can banish any card makes it a very significant hit against all 5 of the decks that I rated as the top 5 decks of the format. This is definitely something that should be considered maining if you have the room. Droll and Lockbird can arguably be the most detrimental hand trap on this list just because it can flat out end a turn. Stopping your opponent from adding cards to their hand, whether it be by search effects or drawing, is just absolutely insane. Especially when you take a look at the top 5 decks in the format, it pretty much hits all of them, a pretty much equal amount, although Drytron being the number 1 deck will just flat out lose to this card. Absolutely main deck Droll. Effect Veiler is very good effect negation, albeit it is a little bit limited, only being during your opponent's turn, so cards like Infinite Impermanence have pretty much replaced Effect Veiler, but for strategies such as Drytron in this current format, it is a level 1 which can play into your strategy. If all else fails, you are able to normal summon it to get a Mu Beta, so if you are going to have to choose between Effect Veiler and Impermanence, you're probably going to go for Impermanence, but definitely main deck the Veiler if you want to for Drytron. Fantastical Dragon Phantasme is another one of those format-dependent cards. It was really good against Dragon Link, it was really good against Sky Striker when Sky Striker was actually more relevant, and guess what? With Engage back to 1, Sky Striker is another threat. So being able to just draw multiple cards, reshape your hand, and then prevent them from targeting you with cards such as Widow Anchor is definitely something to look out for. I don't think I would main it because there aren't too many strategies that entirely revolve around link summoning, but you could side this in against Sky Striker, making it much more of a side deck based choice. Next is Ghost Bell in Haunted Mansion, which is the graveyard equivalent to Ash Blossom, where Ash Blossom would stop any reason that you would touch your deck. Ghost Bell pretty much stops any reason that you would touch your grave. Almost every top strategy right now does something in their grave that Ghost Bell can stop, such as Drytron, Tri-Brigade, Sky Striker, Invoke Shaddoll, and Salamangreat, all of which can very much be stopped by a Ghost Bell. This quite possibly could be the contender for the best hand trap in the game at this current point in time. I have a very love-hate relationship with Nibiru the Primal Being. Nibiru is, in theory, an absolutely crazy card, but for this format, unfortunately, I don't even think it's worth siding, let alone maining. The fact that you have decks like Drytron that can put up a Herald of Ultimateness before their 5th summon, or as their 5th summon rather, the fact that Tri-Brigade can make Appaloosa as or before their 5th summon, you have Sky Striker, which isn't going to summon 5 times in a turn, and Invoke Shaddoll that is pretty much going to do the same thing. You're not necessarily summoning 5 times in a turn. Out of the top 5 decks, the only one that Nibiru can realistically, reliably hit is Salamangreat, and I just don't think it's that strong of a hit against them. This is a card that is really good in certain formats, just being able to completely clear a board for absolutely free, but right now it just doesn't do enough. I would not even play Nibiru. And finally, we have Psy-Framegear Gamma, which is another love-hate relationship card with me. It's one of those cards that I just feel like it does so much better when my opponent uses it versus when I use it. It can be really good in the main deck because whether you're going first or second, if you're going first, you can use it to stop your opponent's hand traps, assuming that you're using cards such as spells or traps that will get you advantage before you put any monsters on field. Going second, you can obviously use it because you will not have any monsters on field, so you can stop whatever your opponent is going to do. The one downside is you are required to play the brick that is Psy-Frame Driver, but it kind of is that double-edged sword. Personally, I don't really like it, but it is still a pretty good card. So now that we've gone over each hand trap individually, I've separated it into what I believe is the correct choices for whether or not you should main or side deck any of these hand traps. Obviously, some hand traps are just flat out better than others. Some there's really no point in playing them unless you're up against a specific deck, but you do need to take all of this with a grain of salt. This is mostly taking into account just the meta as an overall just existence rather than what you will be seeing at your own individual locals or tournaments. So the results could vary, but this is what I believe is correct. So let's go ahead and crown the top 3 of these hand traps. Coming in at 3, we have Droll and Lockbird. The reason that this is third is because while it does hit a good number of the top current decks, the only one that it just flat out kills is Drytron, and it is definitely the strongest hit against Drytron. So it is something that I would consider maining, but it should not take the first slot if you only have room for 1 or 2 hand traps. Taking second is going to be Ash Blossom. As I said, it is just generically the most usable hand trap. No matter what deck you are playing against, your opponent will have something that you can drop an Ash Blossom to stop, so it is just overall good. Unfortunately, not the best, but it is definitely worth maining in the second slot if you have room for 2 hand traps. And finally, the number 1 best hand trap of the July 2021 format is going to have to go to Ghost Spell and Haunted Mansion. I just think that this card is absolutely crazy when you take a look at the top 5 decks. In the Drytrons, you are able to stop all of their effects to summon from grave. You are able to stop the adding back of the Meteonis Drytron ritual spell. Against Tri-Brigade, you can stop Revolt, which is really the only thing that you need to stop in that deck. In Sky Striker, you can stop back the Kagari, you can stop the multi-roll. In Invoke Shaddoll, you can stop Invocation, you can stop the Shaddoll Schism, and then finally in Salamangreat, you can stop Spinny, and you can stop Jack Jaguar, and those are just some of the things that it can hit in all of the top decks. This card is absolutely insane, and if you only have 1 spot for a hand trap in your main deck, you should absolutely make it Ghost Bell. Hopefully this video was informative for you guys, and if you liked it, make sure to like the video, subscribe, share it with your friends, and I will see you guys next time.